So today's wisdom talk is a little bit of a continuation of the sort of subject matter I've been talking about over the last few weeks. And since it's been 2 weeks since you last saw me, I would like to say that at the moment I'm working my way through a series of sequential headings in a Buddhist teaching called the Mangala Sutta, which is sometimes called the 38 Blessings of Life, which are a list of 38 values or character strengths or practices, which, if you practice them, they lead like a staircase towards the next more esoteric one in the sequence. And although there are 38 of them, they come in 10 sort of broad headings, and the one which we're working our way through at the moment is called Becoming a Pillar of Society. So it's the sort of thing you might consider to do once you have your life pretty much under control, like you can stand on your own 2 feet financially, your family doesn't have any problems anymore, and you can look a little bit more widely in society to see what you can do for others to give something back. And the last topic I talked about was that of generosity, where you share what is excess to your needs for the benefit of others, basically. But it's not the only thing in this section. The one today, called Dhamma Practice, may seem like just like practicing spiritual teachings, but actually the way it fits in with what I've been talking about already is to have a little bit more of a sort of a level-headed view of how to help others in a way that you're not biased one way or the other towards particular groups of people who you might want to help or not want to help. So a fairly sort of even-minded, level-headed, almost just or fair way of approaching the way you help others in society. But we'll explore this term in a little bit more detail because it comes from a scriptural term of Dhammakaya. And if you have any background at all in Buddhism, then you know the word Dhamma, or recognize it as being generally spiritual teachings or what the Buddha taught. But actually it's a little bit more of an ambiguous term than that, because it can have as many as 40 different meanings if you look at the scriptural term. And in English, we make even more of a fuss of the word because sometimes we spell it with a big D and sometimes with a little d. Generally, if it's a big D, then it's like important Dharma, which is like comes from the Buddha and it's like very sacred and so on. Or it can be spelled with a small d, which would just mean things like mental phenomenon, generally. So if it's with a small d, then it just means whatever goes on in your mind, or it might mean various things like old age, sickness, death, anything which is the nature of life. So it's not an easy thing to understand just from a single word. As for Jariya, it means conduct, so practicing or conduct. And really the main thrust of the meaning Dhammacharya, when you put the 2 words together, means becoming pure. So obviously it concerns the sort of things that are good and correct in life as ways to deport ourselves. But especially it concerns respecting human dignity on 3 levels of meaning. Our own personal human dignity, the human dignity towards other people who we have in our lives, but also human dignity on the level of society and the economy. So things which have ramifications that go beyond who we know in society to everyone, society at large. And actually we come back to many aspects of the things which are concerned with human dignity on the level of the economy, especially when we come back in a couple of blessings' time to talk about blameless work or right livelihood, and also avoiding things like intoxicants in society as well. So I won't talk about those today, but really you might understand it more as focusing on two different goals. Firstly, to purge yourself of the effects of any unwholesomeness which you have in your past. So you might refer to that as practicing for your own purity, but also to further your own present level of good deeds, which you might call pure practice. So, to put this in context, Dhamma practice is about managing to help other people without taking sides too much. Especially, this is particularly important when you embark on work, any work of social value, because you need to be the sort of person who is impartial, especially when you start to have an influence on the other people who you reach out to through your activities. So if we look at how we might do Dhamma practice to purge ourselves of any unwholesomeness in our past, we might compare to the other ways which this is approached by faith traditions who we might be more familiar with. This idea of purging in other religions, in Christianity, and especially Catholicism, if a Christian breaks a commandment of some sort, then they will go to confession with a priest at church and sort of unburden themselves. Or if they are receiving their last rites, then they might unburden themselves of any sort of residual bad blood which they have on their mind, so that they can leave the world with a mind that is unburdened. In India, it's a little bit of a different approach. Especially on full moon days, there's a belief that if you go down and bathe in the river Ganges, because the river Ganges, of course, is a sacred river, then all your sins will be washed away, as if it were a sort of physical dirt. The Buddha, however, was not particularly impressed by this practice, and his take on this is that whether a person is pure or impure is their own doing, and there is no one who can remove sin or render another person pure. So it doesn't sound like very good news, especially for anyone who's got something on their mind. The good news, though, is that Buddhism does have its own approach to purification, and it's a little bit different from that of other religions in that it doesn't concern itself so much with purging sin or accumulation of bad deeds in the past, but to avoid accumulating further ones in the future. But getting rid of anything that we do have in our past is rather like smelting gold. When you sort of do your prospecting for gold and rummage around in rivers and so on with your pan to sift out the gold nuggets or whatever, then you need to work your way through the impurities little by little. And maybe in the beginning you start with the gross ones, so you sort of separate out the gold nuggets from the mud or whatever, and then you get a little bit deeper to the medium ones, and then you finish up with the subtle ones where you actually sort of melt and smelt the gold into just pure ingots. At this level, we're really talking about working at the gross level to actually get to the gold, panning out the coarse sand and grit in the beginning. And generally, the way one would go about that from the point of view of Buddhist practice would be to keep ethical precepts, which you try to keep yourself or train yourself to stay on the right side of behavior where you don't take advantage of the weaknesses in others. You respect their human dignity, both in yourself and in others. Sometimes Buddhism, I should add as a sort of aside, does have a practice of confession too, not to be outdone. But especially within monasticism, the idea of confession is to avoid sort of any unwholesome behaviors you have from becoming habitual by informing a fellow member of your community, oh, I have transgressed such and such a minor behavior, I intend not to do it again. And by admitting that to a fellow member of your community, then it reinforces your own commitment to not go down that path any further. So that's what confession would be used for within the Buddhist practice. So rather than absolution in Buddhism, they tend to have a slightly different approach, which is maybe would more accurately be called dilution. And the synonym that goes with this is if you regard any unwholesome stuff in your past as being like grains of salt, it's going to stay there unless you do something about it. And rather than go looking for the salt, actually one way to make the salt less effective in bringing saltiness into your life is to add water to it. And the water in this case would be new good or better things, good deeds, good practices in your life. If it were a glass of water and you had salt crystals in there and you filled up the glass of water with pure water, if you taste the water, probably you could still detect the salty taste. But it's better than just pure salt, right? However, if you increase the size of the container and you fill that up with water and don't add any more salt, you've got a whole bucket of water. Maybe if you taste that, you can still detect a little bit of salt in there, but it's less than before. But if you increase the size of the container again, so you've got a huge holding tank of water, no more salt, just more and more pure water there. Even if you taste the water now, I'm sure you would not be able to detect salt in there anymore, even though the salt is there, but the water is so much that the salt doesn't effectively give its taste anymore. And this would be the idea also within Buddhism, that although you can't get rid of the salt, it has to sort of wear itself out basically, but you can do more and more good things in your life to the point that the saltiness or the unwholesomeness in your past is insignificant by comparison. That would be the sort of thinking, sort of realistic, you might call it, thinking of behind getting rid of any unwholesomeness in one's past to overcome the effects of any unwholesomeness still there. So the water for dilution is generally cultivated by what's known as the tenfold path of wholesomeness, which you might recognize. I mentioned it a few times already when I've been discussing the ethical precepts within Buddhism: not killing, stealing, committing adultery, telling lies, malicious gossip, speaking harshly, chattering idly, thinking to take the possessions of others, being vengeful, or being of wrong view. And those are ideals which one would try to work towards. But as you may notice, some of them are even to do with states of mind, so you can't keep up with your thoughts on every occasion. And generally the way one would go about that in a practical sense, especially on the gross level, so think sifting out the nuggets from the sand and grit in the river, would be to avoid actions by which we take advantage of the weaknesses in others, or otherwise compromise their human dignity. From there, we would try to go to the flip side by reinforcing any positive qualities that we have towards others, to improve their sense of human dignity in life. And that would be by expressing compassion towards others, by being generous towards others, by being content with one's lawfully wedded, or generally anything we can do to facilitate family harmony, by truthfulness, and by cultivating mindfulness. So that would be the flip side of avoiding doing things which are exploitative towards others. Make more sense? So adding to the water in case there's any salt still there. And these 10 items, which I said are like ideals which we try to work towards, they are particularly powerful. They're so powerful that if you are the sort of person who habitually keeps to those sort of ideals in life, they can actually almost make their way into the fiber of your being in a way that transforms your life for the better. And to finish off with today, I would like to tell a little story about a past life of the Buddha-to-be, the Bodhisattva as he is known. And there was a particular lifetime when the Bodhisattva was a student who went away from home in order to get his education. It would be the equivalent of being sent off to college these days, where you had to go to a new town and study with someone who was very learned, who in this case was a teacher called Dissapamokkha. And while the Bodhisattva was studying there, one of his fellow students passed away. And the Bodhisattva informed his teacher in an offhand comment that where he lived, no one younger than 100 years old could die by misadventure. So another student died, the Bodhisattva didn't die, but he passed on the knowledge to his teacher that where he came from, no one died under the age of 100 years old. That would be their life expectancy. And the teacher, although he was very knowledgeable, couldn't bring himself to believe what his student was saying. So he thought he would test out the truth of what the Bodhisattva said. So what did he do? He thought he would fake the death of the Bodhisattva and go and inform the Bodhisattva's parents of the bad news. With me so far? So what did he do? Well, he got some old bones, probably from a goat or something. He wrapped them up in a parcel, and he, with a very solemn face, he made the journey back to the place where he knew the Bodhisattva had come from. And when he knocked on the door of his alive student's father, he said with a very solemn face that he had come to return the bones of his son, and with great regret. And the Bodhisattva's son, like many parents informed in such a way, could not believe his teacher. And some of the other villagers, when they overheard the news, they not only did not believe the teacher, but they laughed out loud. And the reason why they laughed was that in that village, everyone was so long-lived that for 7 generations, no one had ever died under the age of 100 years old. And the reason for their being so long-lived was that in that village they were particularly well known for practicing that tenfold path of wholesomeness, which I mentioned before. So those ideals of non-exploitation of other people, they were very strict about that. Hence the very long-lived nature, because the virtues which they practiced were so strong in everyone in the village that it had become part of the fibre of their being, part of who they were, to the point that it even affected the quality of their health. So even the teacher could not trick the parents in that particular case. So for those of you who are new to meditation today, if you felt it was useful to you and you enjoyed it, then I would encourage you to remember what you have practiced today and practice it further at home. A realistic length of time to practice meditation once a day might be about 20 minutes. Today was half an hour, but at home you can maybe start out with 20 minutes. Find a time of the day which is suitable for you, which might mean a time when you're not feeling too tired, a time when you know you won't be interrupted too much by other things going on in your life. It might be first thing in the morning, it might be last thing at night, especially if you're the sort of person who has problems getting to sleep. Sit down comfortably, close your eyes, relax your body, clear your mind, focus within, clear your mind of thoughts for 20 minutes. And in the beginning it may be quite hard for you, but little by little, if you practice each day, it will become easier. You find that you are able to go further in the 20 minutes that you've set for yourself, perhaps to the point that you want to increase the length of time eventually. But it's important really to try to get a habit in the beginning and then build upon that habit once it is a little bit better established. If you find it's hard for you to remember how to meditate, then you might make use of this particular app called MindGem, which you can download onto your mobile phone, either on iOS or Android, and it's got a selection of audio tracks on it by which you can meditate along with some instruction as you are meditating. And there's even a timer by which you can set the length of time you want to meditate as well, in case that happens to be a little bit longer than the actual instruction itself. Generally, if you meditate on your own, you'll be able to keep up your good intentions for about 7 days on average, and then you get a little bit lazy generally, in which case it's good to join in with a class of like-minded people at least once a week, maybe on the Tuesday night here, where there's a half an hour meditation, or perhaps on the Thursday evening where the meditation is a little bit longer, to 45 minutes, and that will help you to keep your inspiration going, and you can also bring along any questions you have about your meditation to ask the monk as well. Apart from that, there's also a meditation online, a remnant of the pandemic, every Saturday between 7 and 8. Usually consists of a little bit of a wisdom talk and meditation, which you can tune into on Zoom using those particular details, in case it's more convenient for you to meditate from home. And if you're thinking to take the meditation further, you might be interested in the meditation retreat coming up in a couple of weeks' time, between the 8th and 10th of July, which is held not here, but down Somerset Way at the Open Pathway Retreat Centre near Yeovil, where you can get away from it all and meditate Friday, Saturday, Sunday until the afternoon. Having that continuity of meditation and 4 sessions of meditation a day is usually pretty good for boosting your level of meditation for those who are a little bit more experienced. But if you're interested to see details of that, then the relevant website would be themeditationsurrey.com.